Ever were to be a sequel to this movie, I think the best person to play this role is going to be Kid Wire. Dude legit dances like a masquerade. His Saturday night party highlights are always the bomb. Like, that's pretty much the reason why I watch the Saturday night highlights. So, before we go ahead, you know what to do. If you've not done it already, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss all the awesome stuff which we will be putting out. And turn on your notification icon so you don't get to miss a thing whenever I post our videos. Go on and do that right now. Thank you very much. Welcome to today's episode of Sodas and Popcorn Reviews. I'm your host Muyiwa, and as always, it's my pleasure to be here with you guys discussing movies that I've seen and giving my opinion, whether they're good or not. And today we'll be talking about a movie that has made great rounds around the world and had positive representation of the Nigerian movie industry. I'm talking about Abba Makama's The Lost Okoroshi.
They get that dream.
You come late to this office one more time. Try me and come late one more time. You hear everything I talk.
This work don't time person.
Every day.
Lost Okoroshi basically tells a story of Raymond, a security guard who is based in Lagos, but somehow seems out of place with the city of Lagos. This guy does not like Lagos at all. I don't know. In the first place, I don't even know what led him to Lagos, because he seemed like he was just a village boy, you know, and he loved the village life very much. What he looks forward to at the end of the day after work is running home to sit down with an elderly man who's probably in his late 60s, early 70s, and sit down and drink palm wine and talk about life in the village and things like that. That's what this guy loves, right? So obviously, Lagos is not his thing. Raymond has this very interesting, to say the least, dreams at night where he's being pursued by masquerades. And I mean, everybody has that fear. If masquerade is pursuing you, you're not going to stop. So in his dreams, he's always been pursued by masquerades. And there's one particular masquerade that is always doing the extra pursuing, the purple masquerade, who we later discover to be the Okoroshi spirit. Now, during one of his conversations with his friend, played by Chiwetalu Agu, who surprisingly in this movie has no reporting to go do to the king, advises him and tells him that, dude, you don't run from masquerades. Masquerades are spirits of our forefathers, of our ancestors, who you do not run from and who you embrace, and just, they give you good fortune, good life, money, blah, 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 blah. And of course, somehow down the line, Raymond decides to take this advice when he was having one of his dreams, and then he stops, decides to embrace the spirit, and thus he was transformed into the Okoroshi spirit, and that's where the story begins. So something I do nowadays, or tend not to do in this case, is I stay away from trailers, because trailers ring too much nowadays. And so just going with a blank slate, knowing that, okay, you're just going in to experience something. Well, if it is a movie that you're looking forward to and you kind of have an idea of what it is that the synopsis or the story is about. And in the case of The Lost Okoroshi, when the pre-production started and I saw what the synopsis was all about, I was like, okay, you know what? I was going to stay away from all trailers and just focus on watching the movie whenever it came out. And I think I'm glad I did, because it was like pretty much a brand new experience for me. Abba Makama, the critically acclaimed director of Green, White, Green, a satire-driven comedy, what he did with Green, White, Green. The Lost Okoroshi explores certain themes, the Nigerian themes, cultural themes, tribalistic themes, while still using satire. Now, in this case, in the case of The Lost Okoroshi, the story, like I already said, is about a security guard who seems to be more in tune with life in the countryside or in the village, as we call it on this side, in this side of the world. And so when the transformation happens, that is pretty much when the movie really starts. And the reason why I say that is because before the transformation, the movie was there was no the movie was boring, like it was a drag, till that moment when there was a conversation between Raymond and Chief Okonkwo, like I said, played by Chiwatalu. So from that moment where they had a conversation where Chiwatalu gave him the advice that he should ensure whenever he sees a spirit, he should not run away. I knew that, okay, there's a transformation or there's a conjoining or whatever it is that is coming, whereby he's going to meet the spirit and they're going to become one. Now, how that was going to happen, I had no idea. But at the moment, in the scene where he's in his bedroom with his wife at night, in the middle of the night, I mean, just picture yourself sleeping, going to bed with your husband, and the next thing you wake up and you see a big, huge masquerade lying beside you. You're going to freak out. And I think I'm going to give kudos to Judith Aldo for the way she acted out that scene. There was this claustrophobic element to it, like she could not move, she was petrified, she was shouting, everything was just going on because she wasn't even sure if that was Raymond, because she was shouting Raymond like, oh, Raymond, come and save me. She didn't know it was Raymond that was beside her on the bed that transformed into the spirit. And, from that moment, the story kind of takes a different turn. It stops being boring, it becomes very hilarious. I did crack up a couple of times in the scenes that followed. And what followed was a good enough storytelling. Now, I said good enough because there were some bits that were off. Now, how do I mean? The story towards the end didn't really jive, if I may use that term. I feel like the way the story closed out, there could have been a better way in which they could have expressed it. I don't want to give away too much, but the way the story concluded, it seemed I would say haphazard. It was not smooth. It was not a smooth closing for me. And I'll go back a bit. This story, from the moment when there's a transformation for Raymond, there would be three main acts or characters from this moment forward. Now, Raymond has transformed into a spirit or into a masquerade. We don't really know what's going on with Raymond because it's a mute masquerade. So expressions are based by expressions, basically. He just had to be very expressive in whatever it is that he wanted to express. So he couldn't even communicate with his wife, he couldn't communicate to anybody and all that. So then there was the introduction of a certain character into the story who served the purpose of exposition, played by Tope Tedela. And I think that also helped to an extent. I think it was straightforward enough, but some elements of some things which he explained in the story also helped us understand that, okay, there are certain roles that this character is going to play in the movie that we are going to see. Now, in terms of the purpose of Okoroshi, the purpose of Okoroshi is said to be, that spirit that embodies good and light and has a bit of darkness and all that, and basically brings a balance. Let me put it that way. It brings a balance to the system or to the force. You get. But I didn't really see him. It seemed the kind of balance that I saw depicted in the movie could have actually been better. What I saw was pretty much petty and irrelevant balances that I was bringing into the story, and I felt like, okay, they could have used Okoroshi for more important purposes in the story. Another thing I like about the story was the fact that it actually touches on how modernization is eroding our traditional values away. A lot of us, myself included, are not very much in tune with our history, our traditional beliefs and all those things anymore, because everything has been modernized. And I think that's another thing that the story touches on, because it tries to create some level of awareness using some certain characters also in the movie. For example, the introduction of Azeago in the character of Eda Nwankwo, who sort of represented the people who in the modern times, were still in tune with our history. But then another element which that particular scene, or those scenes that had some Igbo chiefs, interacting with Okoroshi, was also corrupted by personal interest, which was another element also which the movie dwelled on again. So in terms of exploring political conflicts, identity issues, and things like that, I would give kudos to the writers of this movie because they did an exceptional job in that regard. Now, in terms of what I really didn't like about the movie, like I already said, in terms of the writing, was the closure. I don't think the movie had a good enough closure. The way the story was woven around certain characters that led to the way the movie closed, it was all over the place for me, and I think it could have been a lot smoother. And the mystery surrounding the way the movie ended, I know the director himself said this movie asks a lot of questions, which for him he doesn't really know the answers, because his job in the movie was to really just ask questions, which we're going to ask ourselves, okay, what exactly are the answers? But I feel like certain characters needed some form of closure in the movie. And even the exposition that was done towards the end, where there was some explanation about, okay, how some people are whatever they are and all that. I wouldn't go into too much detail so I don't spoil it for people. It really didn't do justice either in, creating a good landing for the movie. My favorite scene in the movie would have been the scene where Okoroshi, goes to the club. It was hilarious. I wouldn't say anything more than that, but I really, really had a good time watching that part, and I really cracked up watching that scene. That brings us to how I felt about the visuals of the movie. The movie was sort of like, in the words of the director, a homage to the 90s, home videos, the way it was shot. It had this grainy feel and all that going on that wasn't too modern, right? So maybe this was also playing to the traditional story element, which the story was trying to tell, because the purpose of this movie is to try and make a case for tradition. So I think in terms of choice of shooting, the fact that this movie was shot like it's a 90s movie probably also plays to the element of the fact that, okay, we're trying to keep to our story, or we're trying to keep to the elements which we're trying to establish. And I think that's consistency. I think that's some form of consistency which you have to give kudos to the filmmaker. In terms of acting in this movie, I feel like all the characters actually did a good job. I think all of them brought a certain uniqueness to their characters. For example, Sheol, before he transformed, and I'm not sure if he was the one in the Okoroshi costume after he transformed, but I would say whoever was in that costume, I love the way the person danced. I don't know how Okoroshi really dances, and I tried to find some videos online. Maybe I didn't find Scout well enough, but I kind of loved the dances that were being done by Okoroshi. So if that was Sheol dancing, I think it's kudos to him. Judith Aldo also, as the wife, I think I also enjoyed her acting, especially the scene where she witnesses the transformation of her husband. The subsequent scenes where she was trying to help her husband transform back was also quite hilarious. I really, really cracked up watching those scenes. And I think everybody else in the movie pretty much was all right. I think Ifeanyi's acting was also something I kind of found very unique. I enjoyed it. Her role was quite interesting, the way she depicted it. And in all, I think everybody did a good job. I wouldn't say a great job, but I think everybody did a good job in depicting their characters in the movie The Lost Okoroshi. It's a good follow-up to Abba Makama's debut, which was Green, White, Green. It's a bit different. At the same time, you can tell that there's a connection between both stories because they explore similar elements. But for me, the landing wasn't smooth. The landing wasn't perfect. And that's where there's a bit of a miss for me with The Lost Okoroshi. I would have enjoyed it a lot better if the storytelling actually was actually tighter, and that's why I'm actually going to be giving The Lost Okuroshi a popcorn and hot dog, because it was a good experience, but it wasn't just good enough. Something was missing. And that's it for me, ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode of Sodas and Popcorn Reviews. Until next time, I'm your host, Muyiwa, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification icon so that you don't get to miss a thing from us on this channel. Till next time, catch you guys around.